Within the One Piece, there is a very special word, that word being incident. If something is described as an incident, that means that this is an event that has actively changed history on a global scale. We've seen many of these incidents play out right in front of our eyes, like the Enies Lobby and Impel Down incidents, and we've also been tantalizingly told of many that have happened off-screen, such as the Rocky Port incident or the Payback War. However, there is no incident more crucial to the world that we experience today than the one that occurred 38 years ago in West Blue, known as the Godvalley incident. A gigantic battle royale featuring the Roger Pirates, the Rocks Pirates, the Marines, and the Holy Knights that would change the world forever. This is the story of the Godvalley incident. Now, to set the table for this delicious meal, we need to talk about the world government, because most incidents tend to begin with an act of dickery from them. In this case, 38 years ago, the world government were holding the native hunting competition, which was an eagerly anticipated event on the World Noble calendar that occurred every 3 years. I feel like the name is fairly self-explanatory, but what happens is that the World Nobles select an island that is unaffiliated with the world government, proceed to surround it with marine battleships, and over the course of 3 weeks mercilessly slaughter every last citizen, all the while earning points for those killed, and this competition results in a single champion who is awarded a series of incredibly rare prizes. Winning also brings great pride to the family of the champion, because the World Nobles are the descendants of 19 ancient families who came together to form the world government and construct a society of quote-unquote gods on top of the Red Line. And these family names are a huge source of pride for each individual world noble. So having the champion of the native hunting competition belong to your family is like your country winning the Olympics. And it gives every member of that family bragging rights, the most important of all of the rights for the next 3 years. And the premise of the competition is quite similar to The Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, which involves a human hunt on an isolated island facilitated by a Russian aristocrat. It's commonly said that this is what inspired Eiichiro Oda to create this competition for One Piece. I don't know how much I really buy into that, though. There's no actual source for this. It's more of a, hey, this thing is kinda like this thing. And I do think that the wealthy hunting the poor has been an unfortunately common idea across human history. But on this occasion, Godvalley, a relatively minor island in West Blue, was chosen as the location for the native hunting competition, primarily due to the sheer audacity of this island to name itself after God. Remember, the world nobles see themselves as gods, so this is heresy to them. But Godvalley also possessed an abundance of natural resources to be stripped following the competition, and it has been speculated by Emporio Ivankov that the competition was concocted as an excuse to eliminate a native population from delicious resources that the world government wishes to claim. But I think that Emporio Ivankov gives the world nobles far too much credit. From what we know of them, I would say that the slaughter and assertion of superiority as gods is their main driving force, and the existence of resources to be acquired is a secondary concern. I also shouldn't undersell the logistics of this competition. It is a massive undertaking that involves temporarily migrating the majority of world nobles from the Holy Land to the Chosen Island, because this competition isn't just for the hunters participating, it's also a big event for spectators and adjacent events that have an interest in it. For example, I imagine there's a whole gambling industry centered around betting on who the champion is going to be and how many points they're going to win by, etc. And to really emphasize what an important event this is in the World Noble calendar, in attendance for this native hunting competition on Godvalley was one of the 5 Elder Stars, Saint J. Garcia Saturn. And this is a big deal because the 5 Elder Stars almost never leave the Holy Land. One, out of disgust for the need to breathe the common surface air of the masses, but 2, because it makes the 5 Elders uncharacteristically vulnerable, which we will see as this event unfolds. But the other major world government faction we need to highlight is the presence of the Holy Knights. This is an elite squad of the most powerful individuals within the world nobles. They're quite unusual and they don't dress in the standard deep-sea diving/astronaut gear, implying that they may have given up certain privileges of the world noble lifestyle in order to serve. However, in exchange for whatever that is, they have been granted elevated power, as Holy Knights have authority over all world noble issues and can even execute world nobles. Putting that into their twisted perspective, this means that the Holy Knights have the authority to execute what they believe to be literal gods. And 38 years ago on Godvalley, the Holy Knights were led by a young Figaland Garling, suspected relative of Figaland Shanks, who was also in attendance at Godvalley, but we'll get into him in a bit. For For now, potential relative Garling was the clear favorite to win the competition and even started with a handicap of minus 10,000 points after he killed the king of Godvalley before the contest had even begun. So speaking of points, the population of Godvalley was approximately 100,000 civilians who were labeled as rabbits for the purposes of the competition. In fact, they were specifically defined as native rabbits, which is important because these citizens were treated as the most common and worth the least amount of points in the contest. In addition to that, the world government also shipped in a stock of rare and unique slaves and criminals to serve as their special rabbits, and during the Godvalley incident, there were reportedly 150 rare rabbits, the killing of which earned a very vague excellence bonus, and in addition to that, there were 13 super rare rabbits which were worth 10,000 points each, one of which was a child Bartholomew Kuma, who was labeled as a super rare rabbit as he was the last known surviving member of the Buccaneer race. So not only is his existence by definition rare, but the Buccaneers are notoriously superhuman when it comes to strength and durability. So even though he was a child, only the best of hunters would be able to bring him down and claim that prize. He was like the world government's equivalent of a loot goblin. In addition to this, every rabbit also had a target painted on their back, so the competition isn't just about killing, it's about the proficiency of a hunter to cleanly hunt. And to get a bit bleak here, if you found yourself as a rabbit in one of these competitions, your chances of survival are, checks notes, 0. Prior to Godvalley, not a single person had ever survived one of these competitions, and it's pretty morbid to think on past contests where the world government essentially spent 3 weeks piling up the bodies of 100,000 plus people. But that was about to change, because the world government made 2 major mistakes in this competition that would lead to an incident of historic proportions. One of which were the prizes on offer, and we'll get to those in a bit, but the second of which was bringing their own rare rabbits. One of which was future Revolutionary Army Commander Emporio Ivankov, but another was a young girl named Ginny who had a very particular set of skills in the world of snail communications, who had been both intercepting and globally transmitting top secret information. And it would be no exaggeration to say that this tiny girl is the single most responsible for everything that happens next. When you think of the Godvalley incident from here on out, Ginny is the face of this event. Because one of the locations that picked up Ginny's transmissions was Hachinosu in the New World, which in the modern day is ruled over by Emperor of the Sea Blackbeard. However, 38 years ago, this island was in the possession of Roxty Zebek, a man whose ambition was to destroy the world government and become king of the world, and who was also powerful as well as charismatic enough to form the most legendary pirate crew to have ever existed. The Rox pirates consisted of Edward Newgate, aka Whitebeard, Golden Lion Shiki, Kaido, Amazon Lily Empress Gloriosa, the original Buckingham Stussy, the legendary Captain John, and Charlotte Lynn, among so many others. There's a lot of unnamed members who we've seen, and also some named members who we haven't seen, like Silver Axe and Ochoku. But the Rox pirates took an interest in the native hunting competition because just prior to this, Hachinosu had been the target of a world government raid, which managed to steal a particularly valuable treasure from the Rox pirates, and this treasure was being offered as one of the prizes for winning the hunting contest. Now, it's never been 100% confirmed exactly what this treasure was, at least not at the time of this recording, but it's heavily implied to be the Ua no Mi Modoseryu, which Ginny describes as one of the most powerful devil fruits in all existence, allowing its user to transform into a mythical dragon. And the Rox pirates' treasure was very likely this, but there are other options. Because this devil fruit was one of only 6 prizes on offer for the contest, which were housed in the 6 individual treasure chests in a central podium location, with one of the other prizes being Niku Niku no Mi, the Paw fruit, which, whilst not as coveted as the legendary dragon fruit, was still noted as being absurdly powerful in its own right. But there were 4 other chests present on Godvalley that we still don't know the contents of at the time of this recording, although it's highly likely that one of them went on to contain a baby. But what we do know for a fact is that the treasure of Hachinosu was among them, and as soon as they heard Ginny's transmission, the full force of the Rox pirates were mobilized and they set sail to Godvalley to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. And if you're a more casual One Piece fan, then the name Roxty Zebek, you might not be too familiar with it. He doesn't get mentioned a lot in this world, and the reason for that is because this order would serve as his final act, because no one could anticipate the sheer scale of anarchy to come. Because the Rox pirates were not the only crew to hear this transmission, as it was also picked up by the Roger pirates led by future pirate king Goldie Roger. However, this event took place long before that crown came into vision. The Godvalley incident occurred approximately 13 years before the Roger pirates landed at Laugh Tale. So this was a completely different era of Roger's life. Roger immediately set sail as well and brought his full force at the time, including right-hand man Silver's Rayleigh and commonly speculated third-in-command Scopper Gaban. And while it's unknown exactly how many Roger pirates were part of the crew at this time, we do at the very least spot Sunbell, Yui, Millepine, and Spencer, although my assumption is that they were all there. The only exceptions would be Crocus because he gets recruited a lot later, as does Kozuki Odin, and Douglas Bullet isn't canon, so his presence is unlikely to be anywhere, let alone here. But Roger's motivation for becoming involved in this incident was very unlikely to be the treasure itself, but more so as an opportunity to confront Roxy Zebek, as after landing at Godvalley, Roger rushed in and cryptically stated, "It's been a whole year. Any idea how I felt all this time?" Implying that his last confrontation with Rox was a year ago, and also potentially hinting that Roger may have lost their previous encounter. From what we see of Roger on Godvalley, he comes off as quite annoyed to say the least and really itching to redeem himself, which wouldn't be too surprising as Rox has been cited as Roger's greatest historical rival, which is a pretty big statement considering that his other rivals were Whitebeard and Garp the Hero. And speaking of him, the second guy, at the time of Ginny's transmission being sent, Garp the Hero was on a lovely vacation when he got a sudden order from then Fleet Admiral Kong to head to Godvalley ASAP. But the funny thing about this is that Garp was initially going to ignore the order. He was informed that the Rox pirates were heading there to get involved, but he kind of brushed that off. But what did ultimately convince Garp to actually, carry out his duty were reports that Roger was heading to Godvalley. And so do you see how this incident is an increasingly large series of knock-on effects? The world government stole a treasure from Rox, which prompted him to get involved, and knowing where Rox was prompted Roger to get involved, and Roger's presence there got Garp involved. But I'd also be remiss not to mention that Garp's most trusted associate Bogard was also summoned and by Garp's side during the incident, adding to his most legendary of legacies. But at this stage, what you have is easily the top 10, maybe even the top 15, or even the top 20 strongest individuals in the world, all heading for the same location at the same time to fight battle one another for their own individual agendas. And the truly stunning thing to think about is that this was more or less Ginny's plan the entire time. She couldn't have predicted just how well it would work, but the idea was to create enough chaos on Godvalley for Ivankov, Kuma, and herself, as well as many slaves as possible to escape. And so each subsequent faction arrived on Godvalley at roughly the same time. And so the Godvalley incident became a battle between the Roger pirates, the Marine forces led by Garp, the Holy Knights led by Figgle and Garling, and the Rox pirates led by Rox, who I mentioned last because going into this conflict, the Rox pirates were definitely the single most powerful faction. The Rox pirates are the one group that to this day has come the closest to overthrowing the world government. And as a result of their presence, some uneasy alliances were formed. Firstly, Garp fought to protect the lives of the world nobles on Godvalley, and even though that's technically his job as a Marine, the fact that he did it shows the desperation of the situation, as he was essentially aligning himself with the Holy Knights, the world nobles, and everything he despises about the world government. But more surprisingly, Roger aligned himself with Garp and the world government as well, actively protecting the world nobles and turning this incident into the Roger pirates, the Marines, and the Holy Knights against the Rox pirates, which honestly wasn't even the biggest issue that the Rox pirates faced. Even with all of those odds stacked against them, they could have come out of this, but their biggest issue was that they were completely incapable of working together. Immediately after landing, they split up in order to claim the treasure for themselves, leaving the crew much more vulnerable than it otherwise should have been. And one of the ensuing conflicts that came from this is suspected to have been Figgle and Garling fighting and defeating Whitebeard, as it's highly likely that Whitebeard was referring to Garling when speaking to Shanks about a certain man who makes his scar ache. But then again, that's just speculation at this point. But what we do know is that the Rox pirates got absolutely routed in this incident. Meanwhile, Ginny, Ivankov, and Kuma were carrying out their plan nigh on flawlessly, as the kids managed to get a hold of 2 of the prized devil fruits, with Kuma consuming the pawpaw fruit and Ivankov coming within a bee's dick of eating the dragon devil fruit before he was stopped by Big Mom, who absconded with the fruit, which again was likely the treasure of Hachinosu that they were there to claim the whole time. So this was a big win for the Rox pirates for 5 minutes. And using his newfound devil fruit powers, Bartholomew Kuma was essentially able to teleport himself, Ginny, and Ivankov off the island and left before the Godvalley incident became truly dire, as this island was then engulfed by the primary clash of Roger and Garp teaming up to face off against Rox Zebek himself. According to the legends, neither Garp nor Roger was enough to bring down this man. And so there's a very solid argument to be made that Rox Zebek is the single most powerful person in the One Piece lore. But Roger and Garp together were able to defeat him, which they thought would bring an end to the Godvalley incident. However, the world government subsequently erased the entire island, either through a buster call or potentially through the ancient weapon Uranus. But But either way, almost 4 decades on, if you ask someone if they've heard of Godvalley, the answer will be no, because they either never learned about it, or because the ones that did know about its existence know better than to say that publicly. But this event significantly changed the direction of the planet. After Rox was defeated and assumedly killed, this put an end to his campaign to become king of the world, which may very well have succeeded if not for this incident. The remaining Rox Pirates members immediately split up, with Big Mom giving Kaido the Dragon Devil Fruit, and with 3 of the former Rox members going on to form the majority of the 4 Emperors of the Sea, an institution that is still extremely relevant to this very day, even if these 3 original Emperors no longer occupy those positions. On the side of the Marines, this is the event that earned Garp the title Hero of the Marines, and he was even offered a promotion to the position of Admiral. However, he refused, knowing that it would only put him under direct control of the world nobles. Meanwhile, the Roger Pirates would escape Godvalley, having won the day and quite successfully plundering the treasure on the island, and upon examining their winnings, they opened a chest and were shocked to discover a baby Shanks, and they would go on to raise Shanks, who would be with them right up until the dissolution of the Roger Pirates. Shanks is suspected to have been either the son or a child relative of Figgle and Garling, who was placed in a chest to keep him safe and who was accidentally plundered by the Roger Pirates. And as for young Bartholomew Kuma, it turns out that he saved 500 people that day, but still felt guilty that he wasn't able to save the other 99,500 others who lost their lives. However, after this incident, the native hunting competition appears to have been discontinued, assumedly because it puts the world nobles in too much danger. So I'd call that a pretty big win for the hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people who were indirectly saved by 3 children. But Godvalley itself isn't a story that will ever be told in the One Piece world. The world government have done everything possible not only to erase the island itself, but also any historical records of the island, and the narrator of the series has simply stated that this event, which is one of the most influential to have ever happened in the history of this world, would be lost to the dark shadows of history.